George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Netanyahu says no, Israel will fight on until complete and decisive victory, causing a mountain of problems for President Joe Biden and for Keir Starmer, the Labour leader here in the United Kingdom. The EU will place sanctions on TuckerCarlson for carrying out his job as a television interviewer. The same EU will not place sanctions on the genocidal, crazed, unhinged massacres still going on right at this minute in Gaza, and indeed increasingly in the West Bank. The political situation hots up everywhere, and this is the best place to follow it. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night because this is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
This is the premiere of the mother of all talk shows from Rochdale. We've broadcast from Beijing, we've broadcast from Dubai, we've broadcast from everywhere in the world, but this is the very first, but hopefully not the last, mother of all talk shows coming from Rochdale, where if you are sentient at all, you'll already know I'm on the campaign trail. The hopes of my opponents, and indeed the hopes of the United States Presidents Joe Biden and his Democratic Party, have been dashed on the rocks of Benjamin Netanyahu's obduracy just in the last hour or two. There will be no ceasefire in Gaza. He has vowed, Netanyahu, that the war will continue until complete and decisive victory. His words, not mine. That complete and decisive victory looks far enough away, but more than 100,000 Palestinians are now dead, maimed, or missing under the rubble. It is a terrible price to pay to keep Benjamin Netanyahu out of prison. But it does pose everybody a very significant question. I saw a video just this evening of a couple of Labour canvassers going around my constituency here in the by-election in Rochdale, lying to the voters that Labour supports a ceasefire. When the gentleman asked them, how long have you been supporting a ceasefire? They answered, well, about 3 weeks ago. But this has been going on since October the 7th, and Labour has opposed a ceasefire until, in their words, about 3 weeks ago. But it isn't actually a ceasefire that they supported about 3 weeks ago. It is a pause, a humanitarian pause to fatten up the Gazan children before they are again hunted down like turkeys in a turkey shoot, like fish being shot in a barrel. It's a humanitarian pause before the bombs and the rockets and the cannon fire and the naval gunfire from just off the coast begins again. A ceasefire, not a humanitarian pause. A ceasefire is a necessary but not sufficient condition. And it's time to make this clear. You are not a friend of the Palestinians. you are not an enemy of Netanyahu's Israel. If all you are calling for is a ceasefire, what we need is not a ceasefire, but an end to the occupation of Palestine, both Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights for that matter. An end to the siege, the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Palestinian land, if necessary their replacement by United Nations forces in those territories. After all, occupied territory is the responsibility of the United Nations. What's needed is a Palestinian state right now. Keir Starmer, just a few weeks ago, maybe about the same, about 3 weeks ago, maybe less, changed the Labour Party's policy, which had hitherto been for immediate recognition of a Palestinian state, its borders undefined, unto a new formulation that Labour will not recognise an independent Palestinian state without the agreement of Israel, something the canvassers omitted to mention to my constituent this afternoon here in Rochdale. Well, that's not good enough, because Israel, as Netanyahu has made clear, will never recognise a Palestinian state, won't even actually allow for the series of Bantustans that many in the international community have come to imagine represents a two-state solution. So if you give Israel the veto on the recognition of a Palestinian state, you might as well be honest and say that you are not recognizing such a state at all. The way I put it is this: a surgeon cannot operate on and amputate his own foot. Although a man had to amputate his own niece's leg without anesthetic on his kitchen table in Gaza just a few weeks ago. The surgeon cannot do that. He has to be operated on from without. And that is what is now necessary. If Netanyahu says no, no ceasefire, if Netanyahu says no, no Palestinian state, we have got to say then no recognition of Israel, no normalization of Israel, sanctions, boycott, divestment, and no more arms sales to Israel. That's what I stand for. It isn't what Labour stands for. And it sure as heck ain't what the Democrats or the Republicans in the United States of America stand for. I'll be quite honest. I'm for the liberation of the Palestinian people, not a cease in the fire of murdering them, a fire that has burned for 76 years. I'm for the victory of the Palestinian people over their foreign occupiers and the collaborators in Western countries who've made it all possible. That marks me out as different from others, I'll grant you. And when I started out more than 50 years ago saying exactly that, unwaveringly that was a very minority sport. You could have filled this studio and not much more with all the supporters in Britain at that time of the PLO. Now you couldn't fit us all into Hyde Park. You couldn't fit us all into Hyde Park plus Mayfair, plus Westminster, plus Piccadilly. You cannot actually now count the number of Palestinian supporters who support justice and liberation for the Palestinian people in Britain. There are now too many of us. And many of them are here in Rochdale. And that will prove decisive when the by-election comes on the 29th of this month. Tucker Carlson did what broadcasters are kind of supposed to do: ask the other guy his side of the story so that his viewers could form, well, a more rounded view of the Russiagate, Russophobia, fanatic fear of Russia that has been fanned over recent years in Western countries. The worst thing about the controversy now swirling around Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin, which will air tomorrow evening, I understand. The worst thing about it is that Carlson is having to justify it in the first place. Isn't it the duty of all broadcasters, all journalists, to tell their readers and viewers both sides of every story and let their readers and viewers make up their mind who's telling the truth, who's telling the lies, and what we should do in response to that conclusion? Once upon a time, at least that's what was claimed of free speech journalism. We have free speech here, they used to say, in relation to the Soviet Union, in relation to China and other such organizations, regimes, governments, and systems. We have freedom here, they do not. Well, now, Tucker Carlson, the biggest broadcaster on the planet, the most significant broadcaster on the planet, with more viewers, more supporters, more admirers than any other broadcaster on the planet, went to Moscow to hear the other side of the story. And the whole of the West appears to have gone into meltdown about this once common or garden foray by a top broadcaster seeking to interview an important world figure to get their side of the story. The European Union today began discussions about what sanctions, aren't they in love with sanctions? What sanctions they will place on Tucker Carlson for doing his job. They're even talking about a travel ban for Tucker. He'll be arrested if he arrives, if he's foolish enough to arrive in Germany. He'll be arrested if he's foolish enough to fight his way through the farmers' blockade and turn up on the Trocadero. He'll be arrested. A travel ban on Tucker Carlson. The same EU which refuses even to condemn, never mind sanction, Netanyahu's Israel. It is the world gone mad. It is the world turned upside down. You're going to sanction a broadcaster because he interviewed somebody, but you refuse to sanction a country which, with your full support, has committed genocide in 130 days of mass slaughter of people in a cage, most of them women and children. That's the world we're currently living in. It is truly, madly, deeply insane. But I predict to you that Tucker Carlson will melt the internet tomorrow evening. He'll break the internet. It'll be the most watched interview of all time. That's my prediction. It's called the Streisand effect. When you seek to ban something, it goes viral. And by seeking to criminalize Carlson, all they've done is attract more and more viewers to the upcoming interview. Tucker Carlson meets Vladimir Putin. I'm going to make a number up. I'm going to say 150 million people will watch that interview. See if I'm right. Now, the political situation in the United States goes from bad to worse for Joe Biden. He has now clearly, entirely lost his mind. Anyone who's watching, as I do, these almost daily videos of cringe-worthy insanity, dementia, unwellness of the man with his finger on the Western nuclear button persuades you that they cannot be serious, as John P. McEnroe used to say. They cannot be serious in running this man for 4 more years. you really ought to open a book on whether he'll make it through the next 4 hours. But that's what the Democrats apparently are planning to do. He can no longer show his face amongst the 50% of his own voters who believe that Israel is committing genocide. The 28% who are not sure whether Israel is committing genocide and who know that everything they're committing, whatever you call it, is facilitated, is the result of the collaboration of Joe Biden with Netanyahu, who he called a very bad guy just the other day, just before giving him another blank check, just before sending him another huge armory of bombs and missiles to rain down on Palestinian women and children. Biden's own voting base know all of this. Once upon a time, almost every Muslim in America would have voted for the Democrats. This time around, I've got to ask what kind of Muslim they could possibly be to vote for Genocide Joe, who's up to his waist in the blood of other Muslims in Gaza, in the West Bank, and even, by the way, in the alleyways of the Christian churches of occupied East Jerusalem. Once upon a time, he would have waltzed into Michigan and come out with their whackingly important electoral college vote. Now he can't even show his face amongst the public in the state of Michigan, which has a huge Arab population, a huge Muslim population, and a huge number of non-Arab, non-Muslims who just hate genocide, who just hate looking at massacres all day on their telephone, on their computer screen, definitely not on their television screen. So he can't go to Michigan. He's lost Michigan. And for a Democrat to lose Michigan effectively means they've lost the White House. And that's what I want to highlight now. I made a joke about it on Sunday's show. Donald Trump is in serious danger of being terminated with extreme prejudice. They hoped that he would be out the game by now as a result of the lawfare that they launched against him on entirely spurious grounds after the so-called January 6th insurrection, which counts as a normal Saturday night in Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow, in my former constituency. If you think that's a resurrection, you come walk with me on the wild side. It wasn't an insurrection, but they tried to portray it as such. And therefore, the lawfare they launched has now failed. They're not going to get him in jail before November. It kind of leaves only one option. And you all know what option that is. So if I was Donald Trump, fool that he is, I'd give him this advice. Get some bodyguards. Russian bodyguards are reputedly the best. Stay out of open-top limousine car cavalcades and make sure that you have a successor in mind. I've only time to deal with one other issue, and it pains me. I was the Member of Parliament for a Royal Navy warship building yard at Yarrows on the Clyde for decades. I used to regularly spend time at the door of the Ministry of Defence trying to secure naval orders for Yarrows on the principle that if we are building warships, and we are an island after all, we do have to defend ourselves after all, then it's best that they're built on the Clyde in my constituency. And I was very, very successful. I secured Type 23 frigate after frigate after frigate, on one occasion winning the order for every single boat in the batch. I was very good at that job, getting things for my constituents. And so it's with some sadness I report that the Royal Navy currently is like a light operetta by Gilbert and Sullivan. The Pirates of Penzance have nothing on the performance of the Royal Navy. The Queen Elizabeth II, our flagship aircraft carrier, had to pull out of the NATO war games because its propeller gave out again. 2 frigates of the Royal Navy crashed into each other in the Solent on their way to the Red Sea, where they were to take part in that traditional British sport of bombarding the natives of Yemen, like some punitive expedition sent out by Lord Palmerston at the height of the empire in the late 19th century. So they were out, the aircraft carriers out. What happened to the jewel in our Red Sea crown today? HMS Diamond turned out to be costume jewelry. HMS Diamond has been hit so often by the tribesmen in the hills of Yemen, the Houthi that they tried to describe to us as some kind of primitive savages, have hit HMS Diamond so many times it has now had to retire from the theatre of operations and limp homewards to think again. As a metaphor for the British Empire's shrunken, shriveled weakness, it's pretty hard to beat. Rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves. Nowadays, Britannia prefers to waive the rules, even the rules of the rules-based order, which is Tony Blair and Bill Clinton's alternative to that grand old-fashioned idea of international law. We've got some top commentary coming up from 2 top guests, so stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. This type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is, to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists, and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, I've only just finished speaking and 24,000 nearly people have voted on our poll. Is Tucker Carlson a traitor for interviewing Putin? That's what the American mainstream media are calling him. That's what the European Union is calling him. Is he a traitor for interviewing Putin? Have your say. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter handle, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream or on Facebook, please share, and share again with all your friends and contacts. And the phone numbers, if you want to respond, if you're in the US or Canada, the number toll-free is +1 844 944 3344. If you're in the UK or Ireland, again, free of charge, it's 08 08196 5522. If you're in the rest of the world, it's 44 203 966 2625. Now, we like to introduce new guests to the panoply of expertise that is here on the mother of all talk shows, particularly young people, particularly women, particularly activists. So Hala Hanina, the prodigious Palestinian activist with a growing support base in the country of mine, the United Kingdom, welcome to the show, Hala Hanina. Hala, tell us, first of all, what it has been like being a Palestinian activist in this period for a person of your ethnicity and a woman at that.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. As for your question, it's been so hard. I've been following Western media when I was in Gaza. We had endured and witnessed like 6 aggressions before this genocidal campaign over Gaza. And in each of them, I wouldn't say I was satisfied, but I wasn't happy with the content of media and politicians that we usually were able to see while we were in Gaza. However, this is my first time to be here at the UK when a genocidal campaign launched over my people, where Israel killed more than 35,000 Palestinians, 13,000 of them are children. And while I'm witnessing all of that horror happening, I was able also to witness the politician position with actually manipulating the truth and calling Israeli occupation, which is illegal, up to this country. This country regards Israel as occupying power and Palestine as occupied territories. However, at the same time, they claim that Israel have the right of self-defense over occupied civilians and Palestinians in Gaza. At the same time, I was able to see the silencing of mass media. So I've been like for more than 4 months now, trying to being vocal and activist for my people in Palestine and Gaza and to show the atrocities that Israeli occupation is committing. However, I was usually silenced by the mass media, and they are choosing, I would say, intentionally to prevent Palestinian voices from being heard by the British people, because if we were heard equally, then no one would not stand with us. Everyone would stand with justice, and everyone would stand with Palestinians in this occasion, and specifically at the genocidal campaign. So I can say that
you have a higher opinion of us than I do. Not quite everyone, I suspect. But what has been the most offensive part of the mass media's presentation of events to you as a young Palestinian woman?
I would say the dehumanization, and I would give 2 examples. There was an occasion when a Palestinian girl, a 4-year-old Palestinian girl, was killed by the Israeli occupation forces. And the commenter, the person who was saying that, I will not mention the name of the news or the media agency, and they said that a 4-year-old woman was killed or died. Sorry, a 4-year-old Palestinian woman.
They called her a young lady.
Yes,
a 4-year-old child.
Yes, and at the same time, they talked about Israeli soldiers, like female soldiers, who are all over the age of 18 to be allowed to be a soldier. They called them teenagers. So this type of dehumanization and unchilding of us and unhumanizing of Palestinians was, I would say, the worst bit of it. However, so many other incidents was made intentionally by the media were also very, very painful, like using wrong language, like attacking my friends. I have a friend, his name is Ahmed Al-Naouq. He's been on multiple media because he's a journalist. And he was interviewed after he had his family, 21 person of his family, all of his immediate family are killed. His parent, his siblings, in-laws, and also 14 nieces and nephews. And in the media, he was actually attacked rather than being, you have to be compassionate, you have to be ethical with a person living a genocide, and every single one he knows and loves and care about is actually killed. But they have been attacking him and asking him insulting question as, were you close to them? And this is it was insane.
Well, we had Mr. Alanuk was a guest on this show, and the journalists you referred to were on Sky News, who were demanding that he condemn Hamas after 21 members of his family had been wiped out the day before or the day before that, when he was still grieving. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable and very rude. They don't respect us as humans. They silence us. And when they choose to allow us any kind of platform, they will take us on the platform just to humiliate us and dehumanize us. And this is not acceptable at all. Living the pain of having our people killed every single second. We're just sitting here, but at the same time where we are sitting here, our people in Gaza who have been evicted for at least each of them 5 times from the north to the Gaza City, from Gaza City to the Wusta or middle area, and then to the south, are now being killed, massacred in huge numbers and intentionally executed by the Israeli occupation forces. And no one is actually giving them the care they deserve to have.
Now tell me this, Netanyahu has said that there will be no ceasefire, that the war will continue at its present intensity, which, as we know, is of unparalleled ferocity, where a heavily armed superpower massacres huge numbers of people, most of them women and children, in town after town, city after city. And the name of Rafah, I fear, will soon become as unforgettable as some of the worst atrocities in modern history have become, because 1.5 million Palestinians are now in Rafah, which is a tiny town. They're there under sheeting, under corrugated iron, the lucky ones under tents, the unluckiest under the stars, in the cold, in the wind, in the rain, in the sea of infectious water that is flowing, sewer water and the rest. Rafah is hell on earth now, but Israel is planning to assault it, a full-scale assault. If that happens, it's going to be violence of unprecedented dimensions, even in the context of this genocide over the last 4 months, isn't it?
Yeah, just mainly to mention, David Cameron, when he was a prime minister, he have called Gaza years ago, 10 years ago, the largest open-air camp, or a prison camp in the world. And now Israel have made it, they made it the prison camp, and now they're making Gaza a death camp. Gaza wasn't like that. Gaza, although it has been attacked by the Israeli occupation for multiple aggressions, it has been under siege and very strict blockade for years. However, we've never had any homeless. The first time I saw homeless in my life was when I came to the UK. We don't have homeless people because whoever's house is evicted or demolished by the Israeli occupation, we usually welcome them and put them in our houses or rent them a flat to stay in. So this is unprecedented situation, even for us, suffering for more than 75 years of occupation and colonization by the Israeli occupation. Israel have, at the beginning, said that the south would be safe and people have to cross at a safe corridors to go to the south from the north. And people who were able to do that, they have done that. However, Israel have actually bombarded them in the south and bombarded them in the north and at the safety corridor. And the worst thing, and imagining what's happening to Palestinians now in Gaza, is that the people who are massacred now, or the people who have been taken hostages and stripped naked and violated and captured in photos on social media by the Israeli illegal army, are actually the same people who are now at the tent finding no food and finding no shelter. And at the same time, they are the same people who had their siblings, parents killed and themselves injured. And they are the same people that Israel is going to launch on them another invasion campaign on Rafah in the south and kill many of them, and again, take many of them as hostages to torture them. So the amount of tragedy that the people in Gaza and all Palestine are now suffering from the Israeli occupation is just the continuation of the ongoing genocidal campaign by the Israelis to colonize more of the land, to evict more of the Palestinians and annex our land more and more. And that would continue, not because we Palestinians are allowing it. No, we have tried our best to stop the occupation, to stop the murder, but it would continue because Israel is impugned by all of the world. The world, when saw Israel for the first time taken to the ICJ for ruling against them in a genocide, which is something huge, have never happened before in the history to Israel. But the world again stood with them. And on the day where Israel was asked to cease all of the genocidal acts on the Palestinians, all the UK, USA, and many European countries and Japan have stood again with Israel and said that they will cease their aid to the UNRWA, which is the only institutions now providing aid and help for the Palestinians. So the world and Israel at the same time, they're working hand in hand to commit something called bomb now, die later on the Palestinians, and at the same time to kill the Palestinians. At the first hand, Israel is actually carpet bombarding all Palestinians, massacring them in hundreds of people are killing together. And Israel, at the second hand, is strategically bombarding every place in Gaza Strip. More than 80% of all of our beloved and thriving infrastructure is now totally damaged. So Israel have made it in a context of bomb now, die later, by spreading infectious diseases, where more than around 1 million now are suffering from that, and lack of infrastructure of health and food and intentional starvation. So Israel and the international community, hand in hand, is killing the occupied Palestinians in front of the whole world in the worst revised genocide I and everyone have ever witnessed. And hopefully no one ever would have to witness something like that again.
Hala, it's heartbreaking, particularly hearing it coming from you, a brave young Palestinian woman in the UK, doing your best to bring the truth before the people. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Is Tucker Carlson a traitor if he interviews Putin? That's what I'm asking. And, well, it's looking good for Tucker. Let's get the numbers in so that the poll can be very large and representative. I'll be right back with your calls after this.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They have nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is Tucker Carlson a traitor for interviewing Putin? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram, on my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Phone numbers again, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344, and it's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, where the number is 08081 965522. And you can also call from the rest of the world on 44203 966 2625. David in England in Swindon has, and he's on first on tonight's Mother of All Talk Shows. David, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, we spoke about a year and a half ago. 2 points I want to make. First one on the Operation Prosperity Guardian, that wonderful name for the Red Sea operation. As we're aware, the Americans are withdrawing their Dwight Eisenhower. It's a great name. They're withdrawing the Dwight Eisenhower. Yeah. And James Heapy and Grant
Good one. You're educating me.
Yeah. They've got it's all on the news on all the main thing. They're actually going to withdraw because it's come to the end of its tour of operation. They're going to withdraw the Dwight Eisenhower. Now, James Heapy and Grant Shapps are going to America to replace it. They've said we can use one of our aircraft carriers. Now, I know what you just said 10 minutes ago. I would not like to be in one of our aircraft carriers in the Red Sea, not with the prop shafts that they've got breaking, because they both had that problem.
Well,
the Queen, Elizabeth,
the prop shafts are junk. David, I'm not an admiral, not even a Jolly Jack Tar, although I might have been a Royal Marine at one point in my lifetime as a young man. But I consider aircraft carriers to be nothing more than floating targets. If the Ansar Allah forces can land rocket after rocket, drone after drone, missile after missile on these big, great, hulking Western warships, when you've got a target as big as an aircraft carrier, if the people want to, they can land their missiles right, well, I was going to be rude, right down your chimney, put it that way.
Yeah, that was my first point, the small point. The second point is, and I spoke to you about a year and a half ago on Nord Stream 2. Remember our friend Nord Stream 2?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a report.
Yeah, whatever happened to him?
Yeah, exactly. The 11 billion, and I always remember you saying, I told my grandson, the difference between 1 million and a billion, how many seconds it takes to count to, a million. Okay, but the main thing is, there's some news out of Sweden today. The Swedish prosecutor, and this is again on all the news wires, the Swedish prosecutor investigating Nord Stream 2 has actually said that he can't take it any further because it's outside of his jurisdiction. But the interesting thing is, he's found some evidence which he can't act on because it's outside. It is passing that to Germany. He's actually found something and he's passing it to Germany. So what do you reckon?
Well, I wonder what will happen next. Maybe like Perry Mason, if you're old enough to remember. The courtroom door will swing open and the Swedish prosecutor will step forth with devastating indictments. But I kind of doubt it. David in Swindon, thank you for reminding me of our conversation a year and a half ago. Nicola Curtin says, all of a sudden, I'm feeling a lot of hope that we will quietly get the revolution that is needed to change this country forwards. because of the numbers of campaigns. And Mega John F1 says, how can anyone vote Labour when Starmer said the Israel Defence Force has the right to withhold water and food from Gazans? That's what I'm asking myself. How can anybody at all, vote Labour in the middle of a genocide supported by Labour? Claire Gillis says, my sister, who's a medic, just got back from Gaza. It's 1,000 times worse than what we are seeing, even on Al Jazeera, says Claire. Warren is on the line from Arkansas, USA, on international law. That would be a good idea. Go ahead, Warren.
Yes, George, thank you for taking my call. I want to put this in perspective and tell you that I am a direct descendant of the original Americans. 100 million of my people were slaughtered and genocided, and I am part of the remaining 10% that survives. Okay? So what I would ask you, because you seem to be very sincere.
Thank God for you.
Thank you. Thank you. You seem to be very sincere, so I would ask you rhetorically, do you know the difference between de jure law and de facto law? I'm not expecting you to answer that, but I will tell you, de facto law is the law that is based primarily on contracts, okay, whereas de jure law is the actual law. In other words, you'll notice that in this international humanitarian law that there are circumstances where supposedly a person is not a signatory. See, that's how they're taking advantage of our legal incompetence as the masses. They're taking advantage of us because we don't realize that the law that they're currently, we feel it. We feel that there's something wrong about this law. I mean, it doesn't really work, and you're right, because it's de facto law. The correct law, de jure law, is called the Law of Nations. And it is referred to in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10 of the United States Constitution. That's the real law, okay? Now, just, if you would indulge me, I am just going to read from Book 3, Section 8, Clause 1, Subchapter 145 of the Law of Nations. Women, children, the aged, and sick. Women, children, feeble old men, and sick persons come under the description of enemies, and we have certain rights over them inasmuch as they belong to the nation with whom we are at war. And as between nation and nations, all rights and pretensions affecting the body of the society together with its members here. But these are enemies who make no resistance, and consequently we have no right to maltreat their persons or to use any violence against them, much less to take away their lives. Now, I haven't read to you my opinion. I've read to you the actual law that they're keeping from you. They're getting you involved in de facto law, and you have to prove whether this is genocide or not. No, that's why they went into this jurisdiction of de facto law, so they can pull the kind of shenanigans that you're seeing before your eyes. They have violated the law of nations, and more importantly, the state of Israel violates the law of nations. So I encourage you, I implore you to investigate the law of nations.
Amen, amen, amen. I will do, Warren. A very powerful discourse. Thank you for making it from Arkansas. Staying in the United States, though once upon a time it was Russian. In Alaska, we've got Grizzly Dave on genocide. Go ahead, Dave.
Hi, George.
Hi, I bet you wish you were still Russian.
Well, I wish Alaska was still Russian too, George. It's very disappointing that TuckerCarlson is being called a traitor while Julian Assange remains in solitary, tortured in Belmarsh for reporting the truth about the U.S. and U.K. in Iraq. And now Tucker is trying to publicize the truth. of the denazification of Ukraine while Canada honors Nazis in our parliament. There's something wrong with this picture, George. I like the fact that you have
there's
trouble
something
with
deeply, there's
your...
something, Dave, there's something deeply wrong. This is a collection of countries built on genocide, built on the genocide of 100 million natives of America, from Canada to Chile, 100 million of them, massacred and or otherwise done to death by invading European colonial powers, who, surprise, surprise, always side with other European colonial powers when they are trying to subdue their natives and are circumscribed a little by the existence of mobile phones and the ability to watch what they're doing in real time. The 100 million that were massacred in the Americas by the European colonialists, the Spanish, the British, the French, and so on, that 100 million, we didn't see them being killed. But we have all seen what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. And that's their problem. And one would have thought that these psychopathic countries, born of colonialism themselves, would feel somewhat inhibited in giving their support to genocide. But it turns out they're addicted to it. That which they committed themselves against the original Americans, they are perfectly content to facilitate as it is being dealt out to today's victims of colonialization. Thank you very much indeed. Comments are flooding in. Sylvia Frost says, "No way is Tucker a traitor. He loves his country. He said so on the video he put out for everyone to see. I saw it on Jackson Hinkle's podcast earlier." And Dim Rockeropoulos 6104 says, "Calling a journalist a traitor for doing his job is the epitome of fascism." And Jeff Turner 2102 says, "Tucker Carlson is a hero for telling the truth. I'm 1,000,000% behind him." And Naughty 40Z says, "For those who are old enough to remember, Barbara Walters interviewed Fidel Castro back in the day. I don't recall anybody accusing her of being a traitor. The BS just keeps getting fed to us. Wake up and stand strong." You know what? They're terrified of Vladimir Putin, not because he's mad or bad. They're terrified that the whole world are about to see, thanks to the TuckerCarlson interview, that Putin is neither mad nor bad. That's what they really fear. Let's go one more time to the switchboard before the break. It's California. Who wouldn't want to on this cold winter's night? It's Muzaffar in California on Israel. It's the Global University of the Airwaves. Go ahead, Muzaffar.
America, Britain, and Israel control the media. BBC, Fox News, CNN, Sky News, and the New York Times, to name a few. Together, they form the axis of lies. Their power cannot be challenged by individuals. At the end of this call, I will submit the names of these individuals. Mr. George Galloway, you're a great organizer and my favorite earthling. You must unite this group.
Thank you.
The group must nominate a candidate for the next president of the United States. My choice is Dr. Cornel West. Mr. Elon Musk, who is mostly on the side of truth, is currently sitting on the fence. He must support the axis of truth. He can use his platform to fund and form this alliance. With truth on the side, earthlings can start dancing with the axis of truth instead of dancing with the axis of lies. Saudi Arabia and India sitting on the sidelines. They are flirting with both groups. This Martian has no doubt the citizens of India and Saudi Arabia support the axis of truth, which is galloping at a steady pace. India and Saudi Arabia must be the wind behind this axis of truth. They must be on the side of history, on the right side of history. Dragging the feet is killing innocent earthlings on a daily basis. I'm going to read you the list of individuals who I feel can be joined with your leadership. Mr. Noam Chomsky, Mr. Larry C. Johnson, Mr. Ray McGovern, Mr. Seymour Hirst, Professor Richard Wolff, Mr. George Galloway, Jeffrey Sachs, Mr. Neom Finkenstein, Mr. Shahid Bolson, Dr. Cornel West, Colonel Douglas McGurr, Mr. Vijay Prasad, Major Scott Reeder, and surprisingly, the born-again Mr. TuckerCarlson. Individually, they are slowly peeling off the lies and uncovering this mask of organized propaganda by this group called the Axis of Evil: Britain, Israel, and America.
Well, Muzaffar, if that was a football team, I'd back them to win any football match, any championship. If it was a government, it would be one of the best governments the world had ever seen. And I'm honoured that you included me in it and indeed afforded me the opportunity to lead it. Most of these people that you mention are guests of ours on the Mother of All talk shows, or on previous shows that I have had, films that I have made. I think I have interviewed and spoken with virtually every person that you mentioned on that hallowed list of individuals. Thank you for the call. Last call before the break. Jamie in Ireland on Julian Assange. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hiya, George. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's coming up to crunch time for poor Julian Assange.
Yeah, and we want to see him free. You probably know that the second appeal is coming up on February 20th and 21st at the Royal Courts of Justice in London in 2 weeks' time. So I really just want to tell you to please tell all your viewers and everyone who loves the idea of democracy at least people having control of their lives, and everyone who loves what Julian has done for all of us, to come outside the Royal Courts of Justice early on Tuesday and Wednesday of February 20th and 21st to show support and to protest for him.
What time, Jamie?
So I think most of the official campaign is telling everyone to be there for 8 o'clock, but I'm going to be there earlier. I think there's a lot of people who are going to be, even people who are hoping to actually go into the courtroom itself, are going to be there from, say, the very early hours of the morning, because we're anticipating a lot of people. And you know what? Even if there's a lot of people, we want even a lot more, because it's such a unique case, George. It's so, you know, I haven't heard it often, but I remember at the beginning of all the WikiLeaks, when it became in the news, "Courage is contagious" was the slogan. And even if there's lots of people there, we want lots more, because what Julian has done is one of the most, it's almost like something from a movie, how courageous he's been, and I feel that we owe it to him. I think some people might say that, well, he knew what he was doing and he knew the risks, but if someone went and did that without knowing if people were going to support him or not, then that means that we should support him even more, because there's no strings attached. I don't want to be glorifying now, but he's, I think, a modern hero, and he deserves our support. And more specifically, I specifically want to talk about the abuse of the legal process as well, which is another reason, because in the news there's been a lot of smear campaigning and everything going right back. This is going on 12 years now. I mean, even when it started with Sweden, that was all a smear campaign, and since then it's just got worse and worse and worse. It's just like a big elephant on the global stage, you know, that no one's talking about. We have the main witness against him, who's been this is the number one witness by the name of Tordardsson, who's been proven now to have lied in his testimony, and he's the main witness against Julian, who said that he's a hacker, etc. It's out now. It's public knowledge that this guy is some sociopath, I think a child molester. He gave false testimony and received immunity for his own crimes as a result. Now, straight away, that's enough, right? But besides that, you've got what everyone else knows is that his legal team were spied on when he was in the embassy, and his documents were taken. Straight away, that's a collapse of the entire case. If you apply that to any other case, once you have, like, even technicalities mean that cases fall apart, you know? Small little procedural technicalities. This is the legal team, his entire legal team being compromised because of the other side spying on them. We know about all of that stuff that happened in the embassy. Besides that, I mean, if that wasn't enough, it's also proven that Mike Pompeo, while he was head of the CIA, plotted to assassinate Julian by kidnapping him or by poisoning him or something. I can't remember the exact details, but it's out there, it's proven, it's public knowledge. That itself...
Well, I do remember them. I do remember them. Jamie, thank you for that. And the details are burned into my mind as a frequent visitor to Julian at the Ecuador embassy next to Harrods in central London. Mike Pompeo, the then CIA director, later Secretary of State, literally planned to the nth degree the murder of Julian Assange on the streets of London. And that too would invalidate any extradition to face the American injustice system in itself. The spying on the lawyers, as you said, is automatic in any jurisdiction, on any case, anywhere in a world that at least claimed to be governed by laws, would collapse any prosecution when the prosecution had spied upon the defense lawyers. Indeed, spied upon everyone, myself included. Even in the lavatory, we were being spied upon by a company being paid by Sheldon Adelson, the Las Vegas computer king, casino king, on behalf of the United States government. That too collapses the case. The liar in Iceland collapses the case. But it still hasn't collapsed. And that's the troubling thing, that they're out to get Julian. They used the oldest trick in the book, and now increasingly their weapon of choice, sexual allegations against Julian that were entirely fictional, entirely fictitious. As I said, for a time alone, at the time, that these allegations were fake, when some people were calling on Julian to be extradited to Sweden to face rape charges. There are no rape charges. There were no rapes. Julian was set up. It was part of the persecution, the attempt to bring about a crucifixion of the world's greatest journalist and publisher, Julian Assange. Everyone be there. Alexandros, a Workers' Party members will be there outside the courts in solidarity with Julian. Hashtag free Julian Assange. Thanks, Alexandros. Let's take a break, after which it's the one and only, and I mean one and only, filmmaker Dan Cohen from the United States of America. Stay tuned. Let's hear from Mehdi. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. This is such an honor because one thing I want to tell you is in 2003, I thought that you, I'll say it, I thought you were a prattling liberal idiot. 20 years later, I'm here honored to speak to you, to say live on air, I'm sorry, I should have listened to you back then. You're bringing the truth to what's going on out there. And one of the things is U.S. policy, whatever it is now, is our government. The problem is that it's run by people with absolutely no honor. They have no shame in what they will do to accomplish what they want. And I really think part of what's going on, that's driving what's going on in Ukraine, is that it's the possibility of all the corruption that it will uncover that has happened there with the influence of our country and NATO since 2014.
Yeah. You spoke extremely powerfully and very graciously, and I'm grateful for it. But you put your finger on, I think, something that's been in the back of my mind for a while. I grew up in a time, indeed I sat in Parliament for almost 30 years, during a time when there were certain standards. There were double standards, of course, and there was a great deal of hypocrisy. But the ruling elite had standards that they tried to keep up. Nowadays, that facade has been torn asunder. Now they're not even pretending to be honorable gentlemen and ladies. Now they're no longer pretending that their institutions, their great departments and ministries are in anything to do with contemporary politics other than an arm of the ruling party. My last word, Mehdi. I ain't no liberal, bruv. I wasn't back in 2003, and I ain't any more liberal today.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is Tucker Carlson a traitor for interviewing Putin? We're heading for a 30,000 strong poll, and overwhelmingly you say no. But it's important, if the poll is to be noticed, that it is as big as possible. So get your votes in on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. The phone numbers again, +1 844 944 3344 if you're in the US or Canada. In the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. In the rest of the world, 44203 966 2625. Uncaptured news is what our next guest does. He is the reporter, journalist, broadcaster and filmmaker, the one and only Dan Cohen. Dan, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. You were a big hit with our viewers last time you were on. Tell us how you're feeling this 2 months or so now on since we last saw you. Netanyahu has kind of shot their fox today, hasn't he? What's the point of Blinken shuttling? What's the point of Joe Biden stumbling? What's the point of Western liberals agonizing if Netanyahu's told them absolutely outright there ain't going to be no ceasefire? How do you feel about it?
Well, it's the phoniest good cop, bad cop routine I think I've ever seen between the Biden administration playing the good cop and pretending that something might be in the works, even though Biden, as we saw yesterday, wasn't even sure of what's going on and could barely stutter a complete sentence out when he wasn't thinking he was meeting with a dead French president. But of course, Netanyahu is playing the bad cop as he always does. So liberals can say, well, we support Israel, but we don't like Netanyahu, as if he is not the quintessential prime minister of Israel. He's the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history. So he represents everything about Israel. But I mean, this has been all the talk about a captive exchange has been farcical all along. Basically, since the only temporary, what did they call it, a pause in late November in order to exchange some of the captives. Everything since then has been farcical. And even before that, because as I showed in an investigation in Uncaptured, you can read if you go to uncaptured.media, called Netanyahu and his Kahanist allies wage war against families of the captives, something like that. Netanyahu has been doing exactly that. He has been doing everything possible to deceive, to trick the families, the vast majority of the families of captives who want some kind of negotiation, whether that's a full ceasefire and an all-for-all exchange, which is what Hamas has demanded all along, or some kind of negotiation. And so what he's done is take a tiny handful of the most fanatical elements of the families of captives and promote them as if they're the majority. Just today, a guy named Tzvika Moore, who's a fanatical whack job settler who lives in Kiryat Arba in the West Bank, he was among families of captives here in Washington, D.C., meeting with several powerful senators and members of the House of Representatives, saying, talking about the plight of their families in Gaza. Meanwhile, this is a guy who partnered with Netanyahu and explicitly said that he wants to sacrifice his son in order to commit genocide in Gaza. These are Netanyahu's allies. So this is what's really going on. Everything else is just a dog and pony show.
Just before we go on further down that track, explain what happened when Joe Biden communed with the dead President Francois Mitterrand, who he thought was president of Germany. But whether of Germany or France, he thought he spoke to him very recently, since October. Tell the viewers about that.
Yeah, I don't know where he was speaking, what venue exactly, but it was just another classic Biden moment where he's just mumbling unintelligibly and clearly is not in his right mind, because we have, in the White House is a very severe case of elder abuse. But that's, what our political system is. That's what it's produced in the mighty Democratic Party. So Joe Biden is clearly suffering from dementia and is planning to run for a second term, but it's just another statement, another obvious indication, indisputable, that he's not all there. He is not the Joe Biden of even during the Obama era. He is gone.
Gone, indeed. Now, the tanks and heavy guns are now massed around Rafah. Now, I know Rafah very well, as you do yourself, having been there many times, passed through the gates there many times. Unimaginably, there's 1.5 million people there now, because there's actually nowhere else to be. They're living in unbelievable squalor, and Israel is about to attack. What's going to happen there?
I mean, it's just the most horrific crime, one after the other. I mean, we've seen this. We're going on 4 months now, and all of these Palestinians in Gaza who were told, go south because that's where it's safe. And if you don't, they said, if you don't go south, then you will be considered a member of Hamas, and therefore you're not a civilian. And many people were unable to go or refused to leave their homes, and they were bombed inside their homes in the north. However, there were many, of course, who did flee south, who were shot at and bombed, who were interrogated, and there were even summary executions at Israeli checkpoints heading south through Gaza, through Khan Yunis, all the way to Rafah. And now the Israelis, unable to combat the resistance and their spiderweb network of tunnels that stretch hundreds of kilometers, several hundred kilometers throughout the Gaza Strip, and the Israelis are just unable to really do anything. They're punishing the civilians. So now that they've obliterated Gaza, they've obliterated the north, they have waged a horrific war on Khan Yunis and kind of the center and heading towards the south. and they've had no real military success there, only punished civilians. And now they are saying that they're going to attack Rafah, which is where they told everyone to go. So this is likely, if this goes on, which it appears it will be, they're completely surrounded, then this will be even more horrific carnage that, Joe Biden and the State Department will say, will shrug their shoulders about and say, oh, we've told Israel to be better about slaughtering civilians. We've communicated to them. But Israel's operating with total impunity. This is just a complete slaughter in every sense of the word. And as we know from the ICJ, this is officially genocide. And Israel has been ordered to not carry out any acts of genocide and has carried out many of those since we heard from the ICJ. So that's sadly what we have in store is more genocide. This is, the international rules-based order that Tony Blinken likes to talk about. It is genocidal.
Now, an unusual thing happened in the Congress, didn't it, this week? The Republican majority in the House tried to send, because of course Americans are awash with money, they have no problems at home, they've got lots of spare, so they tried to send $17 billion to Israel. That's another $17 billion to Israel. And it failed. It was defeated on the floor of the House. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there's a huge fight in the Congress about that because Republicans want more and more so-called border security. Even this concept is basically farcical. I mean, we do have huge amounts of people coming over our border, but it's not for lack of security. It's because we have basically obliterated entire countries in Latin America and elsewhere and taken their wealth and sanctioned them, basically forcing them to flee their countries. So for the Republicans, passing this money, these billions and billions of dollars to go to Ukraine and to Israel is contingent upon further militarization of the southern border, as if lining the border with military and more Department of Homeland Security, which since 9/11 has become the largest part of the U.S. government. That's basically what it comes down to. So there has to be more and more militarization of the U.S. border in order for Republicans to fully agree to what Democrats want to do to send to Israel another $13 billion. So this, I mean, you can just see the divide is not over anything of principle, of anything that's going to help people. It's not, I'm about to get on a train at Union Station in the main train station in Washington, D.C. If you go down there, all that's out front are homeless people living in tents. That's what this beautiful Union Station, this stately building, is surrounded by homeless people all over the streets in the Capitol here in Washington, D.C. So neither of the parties, neither Republicans nor Democrats, want to address the actual issues facing Americans: inflation, the economy, hunger, these kinds of things. They just want to send more money to their, different piggy banks to enrich, whether it's the military-industrial complex overseas or the Israel lobby, or line the pockets of military contractors that are gonna have a bonanza on the border.
Well, it's only a few months to go until you get to change all that. You can choose bonkers Biden, you can choose Zion Don Trump, or you can go for crazy Kennedy. Which do you think the people are going to go for at this stage?
Well, there's no question that Donald Trump is the most popular politician in America. Clearly, nobody believes in Joe Biden, not even the people around him. That's just they're playing charades as if he's like a real president, when obviously he has no power. RFK, Bobby Kennedy is sort of playing the pseudo anti-establishment role, except he's said that he would do basically the exact same thing that Biden is doing with Israel. He's a total Zionist. He's in the Israel lobby's pocket. We see him. I mean, my question for Bobby Kennedy is, he says he would free Assange. What is he doing making public appearances with Miriam Adelson, the husband of the late Sheldon Adelson, whose fortune, who was the front man basically for the CIA, as you were discussing, spying on Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy? That undermines everything that Bobby Kennedy claims to represent, and let alone his support for genocide in Gaza. So we have him playing this kind of pseudo anti-establishment role. And then, of course, we have Donald Trump, who, I mean, we know he says he would, this war in Gaza wouldn't have happened. He would end the Ukraine war. Meanwhile, he does appearances with the most rabid neocons in all of Congress, with Lindsey Graham, who wants to bomb Iran, who wants to kill all Palestinians, who wants Ukraine to fight until its last man. So Donald Trump is basically fake too. He's, it's our entire political system is fake. And, it's pretty obvious that nothing good is going to come from it, no matter who you vote for.
Well, if it's any consolation, and I know it won't be, ours is just as fake over on this side of the Atlantic. Dan Cohen, as always, a pleasure, an honor to have you on the mother of all talk shows. Is Tucker Carlson a traitor if he interviews Putin? That's the big question this evening. More than 27,000 of you have already voted. Let's get it to 30,000, shall we? Before the poll closes in about 25 minutes from now. Merck Caducis says one can criticize Zionism for its evil without being anti-Semitic. To equate the two is a stupid thing to do. As a Jew, I condemn Zionism for its prejudice, genocide, and evil. God bless all Palestinians. Thanks, Merck. And Damas says there are 3 types of liars. 1, the common liar. 2, the mythomaniac liar. And then 3, there is Israel. And Morn's Lad says Al Jazeera reporting on Gaza massacres is gruesome watching. I just can't stomach it anymore, especially when it's little kids dead or screaming when wounded or mutilated. You and me both, lad. A quick break and then more of your calls.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
This is the Rochdale premiere of the mother of all talk shows. We're going to bring show business, rock and roll, and a bit of star power to the town of Rochdale. it'll be a shot in the arm. It's the first broadcast of MOATS from Rochdale. I pray that it will not be the last. Is Tucker Carlson a traitor if he interviews Putin? Answers yes or no on Telegram, on Twitter, on the YouTube community stream, and on the YouTube community poll. The US numbers, and remember the show is now at 7 o'clock every Wednesday, 7 o'clock UK time, as well as the Sunday show, both of them now starting at the same time. The US number +1 844 944 3344. The UK number 0808 196 5522. The worldwide number 44203 966 2625. Lance is on the line from Canada. He's always worth hearing. Very sharp, Lance. Go ahead, Lance.
The economic definition of war is that war is the rapid movement of capital. And it's the movement of capital that sort of makes it work. So my thought is maybe on this Palestine thing, we should put a different paradigm in our heads. Would it not behoove the U.S. to just annex Israel and make it part of, because, I mean, the real desperation here is that they need to keep the oil flowing in U.S. dollars. And they say that Israel's a beachhead, but if Israel was actually a state, then they would be free to buy the Palestinian land, kick them off of it like the people of Hala Hanina, do whatever, and maybe with less violence. There's a point where I think people need to take a different path. I don't know what you think of that path, but I just thought I'd throw it out in the world.
Well, I'd say don't put ideas in their head. It's not the craziest idea in the world that Israel becomes the 51st state of the Union, although Britain would quite like that accolade for themselves, at least our rulers would. If there was a case for a so-called Jewish state, the place for it was in Germany, wasn't it? It was the Germans that massacred the Jews, not the Palestinians.
Well, okay.
Yeah, last word.
Okay.
Last word to you, Lance.
Well, okay. I mean, the Germans massacred the Jews, but if we're talking about the idea of an ethno state, to me, the sheer idea of that is disgusting. I mean, we've seen footage and tons of videos of IDF people, IDF members, beating the crap out of Hasidic Jews or just Jews that protest the thing. So once you have an ethno state, everything just keeps getting, it can only go downhill from there. I don't care what it is. And actually, people view Iran as an ethno state, but, it kind of is less of an ethno state than Israel is now by my definition of an ethno state. But anyway.
Very much so. In fact, the oldest Jewish community in the world is in Iran, and a very honored place it has in the society. They have members of parliament, they have extra rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Imagine that. Who knew? Thanks, Lance. 72 Marshflower 15 says, I'm not a fan of Tucker Carlson, given how he cheerled the US through Iraq and Afghanistan, but he's ever more patriotic now than most Americans in that he's choosing to be informed and knowledgeable. And Talos says, Medvedev has the best posts on Twitter. They are pretty good, I must say. Michael is on the line from Merseyside in England. Let's hear from him. Go ahead, Michael.
All right, George.
Good.
Well,
go ahead.
Obviously, I'm from Merseyside. I met you in Birmingham, and I spoke to you about getting you and Chris to Merseyside to speak. I've successfully done that.
Yes, I remember, yes.
Yeah, I've successfully done that. I managed to get you a platform. I've spoke to Chris Williamson, not spoke to him directly, but through DMs on Twitter. He's a little bit ill right now, so it should be coming soon. Plus, it was also my comments that prompted low-key support on Twitter. My point is, I've caused an activist. I'm an activist. I joined the party recently. I've caused a little bit of trouble in the party, and I was getting ignored, so I left. And I want that rectified. I'd like to rejoin.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I know nothing of any of this, Michael, I quickly add. But I'm very glad to hear that you're rejoining the Workers' Party that I have the honour to lead and whose candidate I am in what will become the very, very famous Rochdale by-election on the 29th of this month. Thank you, Michael. Sarah Louisa OW9TW says Tucker is not a traitor. On the contrary, a long overdue opportunity to hear Vladimir Putin's point of view. Let's see if Zelensky is brave enough to be interviewed. Look, the truth is that once people see and hear Vladimir Putin, President Putin, they're going to know how much they've been lied to about everything. From the fact that he's dead, that he's had multiple heart attacks, that he's got cancer in every organ in his body, that it's not him, it's a double, that he's got doubles everywhere. Everyone's going to realize these were all lies. All of them lies. That he's not Vlad the Mad or Vlad the Bad, but that he is the extremely popular president of a very important country with whom it would be far better to be in peace and amity with. That's what they're scared of Tucker Carlson's interview for. Gunny, 1972, though, says Carlson doesn't have the guts to ask the right questions. You've obviously seen the interview prematurely, Gunny. I haven't had that benefit, so I'll have to wait till I actually see the interview to see whether you're right or not. Jamal is on the phone from Lebanon on Western hypocrisy. Jamal, welcome.
Hello.
Yes, welcome. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm from Lebanon. God bless you, George. I've been following you for many years now, even before the mother of all talk shows. God bless you and the job you're doing.
Thank you.
I just want everybody to know how sick and disgusting and with lies and deceit the Western government are. Like the U.S., they always say they don't negotiate with terrorists. Okay, fine. So hear this. They branded Hezbollah in Lebanon as a terrorist organization. But for the past 4 months, they have been sending diplomats to Lebanon to negotiate with Hezbollah. So how do you calculate this? If terrorists send diplomats to negotiate with them?
It's farcical. They say they don't negotiate with terrorists. They just give them $3.7 billion every year in the form of Israel and have a very, very questionable relationship with ISIS, particularly in the country next door to you. They don't negotiate with terrorists except when those terrorists are their terrorists, overthrowing their enemies. And sometimes, in the case of Al-Qaeda, they are on the side of the terrorists until the terrorists decide they're no longer on the same side as them. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and one man's terrorist is often actually a client in the case of the United States. Last word to you, Jamal.
Well, I'm glad Hezbollah refused all options. They said they will only stop if Israel stops.
Yes, they will not withdraw even 1 meter from the border of their own country at the demand of Netanyahu. And they will not stop tying down almost half of the Israeli armed forces until the war against the Palestinian people has stopped. Well done, them. Brian Holden says, a patriotic capitalist is an oxymoron. And Merck Cardusis says, Mr. Galloway called Norm Coleman of Minnesota a lick spittle. Coleman had never heard that term before, but he does now. Uzi 1mm says, Workers' Party mug. Nice. Let's take a quick break, and then it's my good wife, who's here with me in Rochdale, just in a different type, part rather, of the building. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a Holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq War. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely. The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Now, you get that film, The Killings of Tony Blair, and my subsequent film, Killing Kelly, the story of the very strange death indeed of the weapons inspector, Dr. David Kelly, in the immediate aftermath of Tony Blair's criminal invasion and occupation of Iraq. I think you'll find both of those films very well worthwhile watching, and you get them absolutely free if you support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. I really need your help on that. I can't stress that too many times or too strongly. I really need your help on that. And it will cost you less than the cost of a cup of tea per week in a downmarket cafe. Just think about that and decide whether you think my work is worth the price of a cup of tea. The legend, Tommy in Glasgow, is on the line on TuckerCarlson. On you go, Tommy, go yourself.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, very good, thank you.
All good, all good. Yeah, good to see Tucker doing what he's doing. Hopefully, I mean, I watched the Oliver Stone interview, and he's a very intelligent gentleman, as Mr. Putin, Mr. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And yeah, you're right. It will show to the world and people who have not seen him what he's like, and it will show them up for the corrupt war that they've committed on, you know, Russia. And it's about one of a bigger picture, George. And the bigger picture. How did your stuff go last night in Rochdale? I've seen a wee few things on it, but not how did it go? Quite good?
It was marvellous. It was the biggest political launch in Rochdale's history, I can assure you. Standing room only, no parking outside. Every inch of this street, Crawford Street, had been completely taken by the motor cars of the people in the venue. There were people standing outside, and even our enemies would have to acknowledge that it was a bit better than the Labour launch today, which seemed to consist of a few paid party officials and a very, very brief visit of the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who couldn't get away quickly enough, who didn't knock a door, didn't deliver a single leaflet, and skied the course, Tommy, just as quickly as he could. You know how these things go. But the point you make about Putin, I've met Putin twice, once at length, at the Valdai conference, where enemies of Russia traditionally gather to grill Putin, and he bats every ball they bowl at him to the boundary with consummate ease. I met him at some length at that, and I met him more briefly and tangentially at a dinner in Moscow. And I've got to tell you, he's a lot more impressive than Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. And Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister, is easily the most impressive foreign minister anywhere in the world. And if people saw them and could hear them, they'd all have to agree with that, which is why they don't want Tucker there, Tommy.
Exactly. Well, George, I mean, it'll be good to see it. Hopefully it's going to come out tomorrow. Tonight, I'm planning a launch for myself. And as I doff my cap off to the new government in the north of Ireland, provisionally, I'm starting my new show at 11 minutes past 9 tonight. My Twitter or X handle is Tommy in Glasgow, if it's okay to share it. Tommy in Glasgow X. So just as the name you've got on the screen, Tommy Glasgow, just put the in front of it, Tommy in Glasgow X. And I'm planning to do a show, provisionally calling it, if it's by your permission only, George, Boats, the brother of all talk shows, because if you're going from MOATS, the mother of all talk shows, into the mother of all parliament, then you need a flotilla taking you up the Thames. So I'm calling out for all the pirates out there. If there's any Yemenis, I mean, you mentioned about Sucky Hall Street. I'm a pirate of the Caribbean, of Glasgow, of the pirate taxi trade. And now... I mean, time's gone by, George. I mean, the Houthis, the Yemenis, where they have the knife down, the jock strap, as you say in Scotland. I mean, before the SNP came along, before the band, the ski and do, the Claymore and the Severe Malky, when they started coming around to cut the what's off of the 16-year-olds, we need some Yemeni spirit back in Glasgow, at least with these knives, to fight back against the oppressors. But that's a side point. The main thing is, at 11 minutes past 9:11 tonight, I'm starting a show. Everybody's got a wee time to get a coffee after you're off, and I'm going to be phoning the good people of Rochdale as a campaign on your behalf, and I would like people to come and join so that we can set something up to fight. We've got 3 weeks to go to get you into this parliament, because as I say, we need a boat to get you up that parliament and get you in there to deliver what needs to be done. And so tonight, if any volunteers can come and join me, the campaign on the phones, the telemarketing campaign by a crackpot will be starting tonight on Tommy in Glasgow X. And if anybody wants to join me, boats, we're setting sail tonight. Pirates, Houthis, Somalis, anybody, Americans, I'll have my own number. And as I say, sincerely, I want to do something it's all about Palestine, brother, as you well know, and the dire consequences.
Well done, Tommy. Boats, I love that. Boats, the brother of all talk shows, coming up on Tommy in Glasgow X. What a wonderful, wonderful handle. Tommy, I wish you all the best in your new broadcasting career. Thanks very much indeed. Now, it's not every man that gets to meet their good wife via the television, especially when she's in the same building, which our friends have kindly made available to us. And they are responsible for our premiere this evening in Rochdale. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Wow, I love the concept from Tommy from Glasgow. Boats? Why did we not think of that?
Wonderful. Boats. Why didn't we think of that? Drat.
Please, everyone, join Tommy in Glasgow after the MOATS, okay? Well, first of all, we've got on Patreon lots of comments on the TuckerCarlson interviewing Putin, Paul. Paul Vinogradov says, TuckerCarlson is a friend to truth and international understanding, and so therefore he will not be forgiven. And Robin Hansman, another patron, says, TuckerCarlson is interviewing a man. Since when has interviewing a man been traitorous? Well, Robin, he's right. Of course, Robin is right, except Putin is not just a man. He is president of the largest country in the world, of the biggest economy in Europe. It's not just any man. And that's why it's a shame to all the Western journalists who are attacking Carlson for doing his job.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's jealousy, Gayatri. They have not themselves been thought important a journalist enough to interview Putin, who's a busy man, let's face it. They are green with envy of Tucker Carlson's success. They sacked him out of Fox News. He went free of charge onto X and multiplied his numbers exponentially. I mean, I've seen at least one of Tucker Carlson's programs net over 100 million views. 100 million. Yes. I think it had something like 5 million when it was on Fox. I don't know how he monetizes it. I don't know what the business model is. But if the purpose is to reach the largest number of people in the world, well, he's already achieved that by a country mile. And now he's about to break the internet, don't you think?
Oh, he's going to break the internet. Fox is going to regret the day they got rid of him. And as you said, yeah, he's the envy of all the journalists. Mind you, Putin might not have received any other journalist than Tucker Carlson, of course.
Well, he might not, but on one of the occasions of the two that I have met him, you were with me, there's nothing mad or bad about him. You might not like him. I wouldn't have voted for him. I'd have voted for the leader of the opposition in Russia myself. But he's neither mad nor bad, and he's the president of the biggest country in the world. You kind of have to understand him, don't you?
Exactly, and that is what Tucker Carlson will show the world tomorrow. Here's an email. It says, "Dear George, I am a man who can boast of few distinctions, but I've occasionally shown a gift for prophecy. The good people of Rochdale will soon be blessed by your rise to command the town's highest political office. Assuming you then continue presenting MOATS, I only beg you to keep in preserve some of that spirited and eloquent force so inspiringly and self-evident in your monologues, so that you have power left to smite upon Sunak and Starmer your most fearful firebolts of damning invective in the Houses of Parliament." That's from, I don't know where it's from actually.
Gayatri, if I'm elected on the 29th, I will erupt in Parliament like a volcano. They won't know what has hit them, at least not until they remember what I was like before. What else is rattling? We've got time for a couple more.
Yes. So back to Tucker Carlson. Rob the musician makes this point, interesting or not. How long before Tucker will be accused of sexual abuse or burning babies in ovens? The tactics of the authoritarian pigs who govern us is becoming way too predictable, and he's right. How long before he faces the same fate as Julian Assange?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know Tucker Carlson, but I think if he had skeletons, they would already be out. I think he's pretty close to being a blameless fellow with no colorful personal past, I think, from what I've heard from others about him. And I think he's a pretty straight kind of guy, to be honest. I disagree with him on a very large number of things. But he's shown courage in breaking away and setting out on his own path. And he's certainly showing courage in going to Moscow to interview Vladimir Putin. So, I don't have to agree with someone in order to admire them. In fact, many of the people I agree with, I don't admire them. Tucker's got what the French say, je ne sais quoi. I don't know what, a certain something. He's got star quality, that's for sure. But we now know he's also got courage.
So this is on a different matter. Sherry one of your patrons says, Mr. Galloway, what credibility has the ICJ have now that Julia Sebutende is vice president? Is this her reward for siding with Netanyahu?
I found that mind-boggling. The woman who voted for Israel in the ICJ, even when the Israeli judge did not do so. Well, I mean, I don't know what they've got on her, but it must be something pretty powerful. Talk about more royal than the king, more Catholic than the Pope. This Ugandan judge backed Israel to the last, even when the Israeli judge had abandoned the cause. And she's been rewarded. She's been promoted. She's now the vice president of the International Court of Justice. How about that?
Shame.
Look, Gayatri, I think that's all I've got time for, if I can be so bold. But the good news is I'll see you right after the show at the foot of the stairs. Thank you very much indeed for that roundup. Elliot is in Florida on the very same ICJ. Go ahead, Elliot.
Yes, George, thank you, and best of luck. I'm sure you're going to take them by storm there in Parliament.
Thank you.
Did you know, I didn't know if you knew that the new president of the ICJ that was just elected, Naraf Salam, is Lebanese, and the media
from Lebanon, yeah.
A career diplomat and jurist, and apparently, according to the media, a frequent critic of Israel. I'm wondering what you think that, whether that's, I know he comes from the elite of the country, but is this a good sign, or I mean, he's going to be overseeing the case for the next 3 years, however long it takes. Is this good, do you think, and a good sign?
Yeah, well, yeah, Elliot, that's probably why they gave this Ugandan friend of Israel the vice presidency, because the new president is the Lebanese judge. And they've got a dilemma now, don't they? They gave Israel 1 month to cease and desist those practices which they believed provisionally to be genocidal practices, and to report back within that month on what steps they had taken to remedy the genocidal acts. Since when Israel has stepped up the genocidal acts, has increased the savagery of those genocidal acts, and may be preparing the mother of all genocidal acts in Rafah in the next hours or days. So what's the ICJ going to do about it? If it can or will not do anything, then what's the use of the ICJ? Is the question that will, I think, resound across the world. I don't know the judge in question. You say he's from the elite. I'm perfectly sure that that's true, but then I think all judges are from the elite, certainly any that I've ever come across. I'm not one of those who think that that means automatically that they are corrupt or ill-suited to the presiding over of justice. I've myself, admittedly in civil libel cases, frequently been impressed by judges. And I'd go farther and say judges are the least corrupted institution in my country. I don't know about yours. That doesn't mean they aren't corrupted. And it certainly means that the other institutions are much more corrupted than they are. I must say the British judiciary has let us down to date on the Julian Assange case. I'm actually surprised the way in which they have done so. I retain some hope, more than most actually, that justice will be done on the 20th and 21st of this month on the Julian Assange case, but I'll be outside in the Strand to try and do my best to make sure of it. Thanks for the call, Elliot, in Florida. David Proctor says, Tucker Carlson is now included in Ukraine's kill list in response to interviewing Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, Ukraine's kill list and the European Union's no-fly list, all for doing a television interview. Kestrel says, what a chance for Rochdale to have the opportunity as GG as candidate with the whole world watching. A moment in time. Please don't let it slip through your fingers, Rochdale. You won't ever get that chance again. Thank you kindly for that. Comments on the poll. Trevelyan Gale says Tucker Carlson is the greatest white man on the planet at this moment. Just be careful you don't end up like Mr. Assange, or even worse, have the same fate as the late, great Gonzalo Lira. God rest his soul. Keith Stone says you should have seen the look on the White House press secretary's face when asked about Tucker. I thought she was going to have a seizure, foaming at the mouth. Mark Beatty says Tucker Carlson interviewing Imran Khan would be interesting too. Well, let's hope Imran is free to be interviewed, and very, very soon. What might well be the last call, I don't know. It's Deborah in Shropshire, in England, on Palestine. It's, of course, the Global University of the Airwaves. Deborah, most welcome. What would you like to say?
Hi, George, and all the best with Rochdale, and I'm sure you're going to wing it. But what I'd like to say is,
well, yeah.
Sorry, you go.
Go ahead.
Sir.
Go ahead.
What I'd
I was just going to say the bookies. The bookies had me at 16-1 on Friday and 2-1 on Tuesday. And for those who follow betting, I don't myself, they'll know that that means the bookies think I've got a very good chance of winning. Deborah, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Dear man, I admire your tenacity for the truth so much. And what I'd like to say, on behalf of the people that I know, that what is happening with the Tucker Carlson thing is, how can we have the truth if all the brave men shut themselves in the broom cupboard?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. You know that old saying, I'm going back in the wardrobe, all the men outside are empty raincoats. And I'm afraid that's the case. All the men outside are empty raincoats. All the men of power, all the men of influence, most of the men of wealth are empty raincoats. And the truth is that courage is now at a premium. Speaking truth in the times that we live in is a revolutionary act. Who knew? I mean, someone called me today, Deborah, the only anti-genocide candidate in the election. Imagine that, to be the only anti-genocide candidate in an election in Britain. Who'd have thunk it?
George, you are not alone. We are many behind you, and we are all journalists today. We were all journalists outside the wardrobe, all behind you, sir, and we're all standing on the backs of giants, and we will succeed, and so will you, my dear man.
God bless you. Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate that very much indeed, from Shropshire. I'm the political son of the late and great Tony Benn, the greatest Prime Minister Britain never had. I've been telling stories about him to people who are interested in my long relationship with Tony Benn, which began in 1973 and ended upon his demise. And Gayatri and I attended his funeral and saw him carried out from the church. If I recall, his coffin draped in a Palestinian flag. Mr. Benn was a great supporter of the Palestinian cause. There he is with my grandson, who's now working on the show. Mr. Ben held in his arms all of my children, except my daughter, his mother, he did. He held my daughter, whose son that is, in his arms. He held my daughter, her children, my subsequent children. This was the greatest Prime Minister we never had. I was telling a story today of the time in the early 1980s when Tony Benn was routinely described in the national media as the most hated man in Britain. That was his sobriquet, the most hated man in Britain. I had been speaking alongside him at a massive rally in St. George's Hall in Liverpool. We stayed in Liverpool overnight. We set off for the next stop on the tour in a motorway services station. This was in the early 80s, before the era of selfies and telephones. When we came in, Tony had his tea and toast. He drank nothing else. He ate nothing else most of the time. And the chefs began to come out from the kitchen wearing their tall chef's hats in order to come and get an autograph from Mr. Ben. Then the other staff, then the other customers in the cafeteria, then the people buying petrol at the petrol station outside began to leave their cars, their doors open. Everybody flooded in to the motorway service station. And the most hated man in Britain got up on a chair and made a speech to the people, cheering to the rafters. The most hated man in Britain. Just think about that. I loved him dearly. We miss him profoundly. It's my honor to attempt in my way. He's a far better educated man than me. I left school at 16, went to work on the factory floor in Michelin. Mr. Ben was one of the most educated men in the country, so I cannot match him. But it has fallen to me to try and carry his approach to politics, his belief in common sense socialism, and to take it everywhere I can in the country and the world. I'm here in Rochdale, and I thank the people who made that possible, who will be credited at the end of the show. And I thank the people of Rochdale for the warmest of Rochdalian welcomes that I have been receiving here. I hope to be broadcasting from here for some considerable time to come. Here on the mother of all talk shows, every Wednesday and every Sunday, both times at 7 p.m. UK time. So it's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. And if it was, come back on Sunday at the same time, here in the same place, in glorious Rochdale, where a rising is underway and where pioneers are in abundance.